Everyone. Good afternoon, Mark. Of course, good afternoon, Father. So ngayon, chance ko na si Father makikinig sa akin. Kasi ako lagi ang makikinig sa kanyang homily. Of course, good afternoon, SESAM students. So, I was tasked to talk on climate change. Actually, hindi naman talaga ako expert sa climate change. There are many faculty from CESAM who can talk more about it. In fact, isang semester na course yun. And in fact also, it's being developed as a master's program in climate change. And I will just be talking about it in 25 minutes. So it will just be it will just be like a tip of the iceberg. Ako lang yung magsiset ng tone. Sabi ni Ma'am, ako mag-set ng tone kasi ang mas exciting yung dalawang susunod na topics, which are the disaster and crisis management, and of course yung sa RA 10121. So, let me start. So for this afternoon, I would like to talk about the impact of climate change in the Philippines. So for this afternoon, my outline will be what is the objectives of this topic, the overview and the Philippines' contribution to climate change, the physical impacts of climate change, cross-cutting impacts of climate change, mitigation and adaptation programs in the Philippines, the challenges. I would like to challenge you as SESAM students how we're going to address climate change and of course the way forward. So the objectives of this seminar is first to raise awareness on the current impacts of climate change in the Philippines, to review the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies by the government, and to reinforce a sense of responsibility and urgency to you regarding the importance of your role in climate change. So let's go to the overview. Okay, so what's the global scenario? The global scenario is even if greenhouse gas emissions were to be stabilized at existing levels, anthropogenic warming and sea level rise will continue for centuries to come. So wala tayong time scale. Yung time scale natin uncertain, hindi natin alam kung ano yung hinahanap natin. And the world temperatures may rise between 1.1 degrees centigrade and 6.4 degrees centigrade during the 21st century. Likewise, sea levels will rise by 80 centimeters to 59 centimeters by the year 2100. And there is a greater than 90% confidence level that there will be more frequent warm spells, heat waves, and heavy rainfall. And there is greater than 66% confidence level that there will be an increase in droughts, tropical cyclones, extreme high tides, and storm surges. Alam naman natin to, ito yung nangyayari na sa Pilipinas. So what's the Philippines' contribution to climate change? Although the Philippines emitted very low greenhouse gas in terms of carbon dioxide equivalent of 142, it ranked 39 in terms of absolute emissions, but a rank of 22 in terms of per capita emissions of greenhouse gas. So while the Philippines has been a minor contributor of global warming, being a third world country, the greenhouse gas emissions are projected to quadruple in the energy sector and double in the transport sector by 2013 due to its growing economy, urbanization, and motorization. So this is a graph of the carbon dioxide emissions from power generation ranging from natural gas, coal, gas turbines, diesel, and oil thermals. And this is also the graph of the greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector. So as you would note, talagang yung trend ay pataas. Yun ang trend. Okay? And who is at risk to climate change impacts? So Asia and the Pacific host the greatest number of people at risk of adverse impacts of climate change. And historically, more people in Asia and the Pacific have been affected by floods, droughts, and storms than any other regions of the world. And for this year, 1960 to 2007, the percentage of people affected reside in Southeast Asia. Tayo yun. 83% of all people is affected by droughts, 97% of all people affected by floods, and 92% of all people affected by storms. So, who suffers the most extreme weather events? This table shows the Global Climate Risk Index. So from 1994 to 2012, ang rank ng Philippines ay 7th. Pero nung Yolanda ng 2013, which affected the global and Samar, tumaas tayo sa number 5. And sa 2013, tayo yung number 1. Because of our absolute losses in millions of dollars, about 24,538 million, and death toll of 6,479. Bukod pa dun sa mga missing. Okay. So the Philippines is the third most vulnerable country in the world after Bangladesh and Vanuatu. Vanuatu is in the Fiji Islands, South Pacific Ocean. So the Philippines ranks third to weather-related extreme events, earthquakes, and sea level rise. And it is named as the most vulnerable country at risk in terms of storms. Diba sa isang taon, natatapos natin yung 26 letters of the alphabet, bumabalik pa sa letter A. Okay. So this shows the Philippine exposure map. Ito yung Philippines. Kung makikita nyo, talagang surround tayo ng mga mga risk profiles. So, what are eminent are extreme heating events, sea level rise, extreme rainfall events, disturbed water budget, sea level rise. Okay, so we have, I think this profile ranks, there are 12 risk profile ranks, 11, and napapalibutan talaga tayo nitong mga risk profiles na to. Okay. So what are the physical impacts of climate change? Actually, dalawa siya. Temperature rise and sea level rise. Let's go to temperature rise. So this graph shows the observed mean temperature anomalies during the period of 1951 to year 2010. And it indicates an increase of 0.65 degrees centigrade or an average of 0.0108 degrees centigrade per year increase. And for the another for temperature rise. So these are climate models which shows the global warming is likely to exceed the 2 degrees centigrade projections with a possible 4 degrees centigrade increase as early as 2016, causing severe impacts to global, regional, and national economies and livelihoods. So as you will observe, projection ito sa 2050, in the very hot months of March, April, and May, kung makikita nyo yung scale, it will really reach 2.5 to 3 degrees rise in temperature. So, for region 4A, where we are, okay, so this is the observed baseline of temperature from December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and September, October, November. So, we can see here that in the year 2006 to 2035, ito yung mga increase in temperatures. For 2050, looking forward, we will notice that nag-double yung change ng temperature. From 1 to 1.9, from 1.2 to 2.2, from average of 0.9 to 1.8, and 1 to about 1.9. So yan yung projection na increase in temperature in 2050. How about the sea level rise? So the Philippines posted the highest average increase in sea levels at 60 centimeters against the global average of 19 centimeters since the year 1901. So as you would note, from 1993 to 2009, makikita nyo yung difference na nagiging eminent yung evident yung red zone, which corresponds to about 30 millimeter rise. So, what are the cross-cutting impacts of climate change? Ano yung mga how do typhoons affect us, the impacts on agriculture, food security, water availability, sea cost, and human health? So this shows the worst typhoons of the Philippines from 2005 to 2015. So noong 2006 we have Remy, 2008 we have Frank, then napuruhan tayo noong 2009. There are two strong typhoons, Pepeng, Ondoy in September, and then Pepeng in October. Then we have Sendong in 2011, Pablo, which is considered as the strongest cyclone to ever hit Mindanao, that's in 2012. And then of course the Yolanda in 2013. And then the Glenda last year, and now yung Lando, which hit the northern Luzon. So this lists the worst disasters in the Philippines in terms of number of people affected. So champion talaga yung Yolanda. So there are about 16 million people affected. And for Yolanda, so 16 million people are affected, 3.4 families affected in terms of damage or destroyed. There are more than 1 million houses destroyed, 248 transmission towers, 33 electric cooperatives, 33 million coconut trees. So, kung pumunta ako doon just after the Yolanda, talaga nakaka-touch at ang mga niyog talagang nagtumbahan. And then we have 600,000 hectares of agricultural lands also damaged. For those needing rebuilding or re-equipping, that's more than 1,200 provincial, city, municipal, and district field halls and public markets. There are 305 kilometer farm-to-market roads affected. Approximately 20,000 classrooms need to be rebuilt and more than 400 health facilities. So yun yung damage na nangyari sa Yolanda. Now, what is agriculture's contribution to climate change? So malaki ang contribution ng agriculture because of the land conversion. So these are, it costs about 1/3 of global emissions coming from methane, from the cattle and dairy fermentation, that's 14%. Ang highest talaga yung use of inorganic fertilizers, which like urea, ammonium sulfate, which are oxidized to nitrous oxide. So this nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. Then of course manure, 3%. Fertilizer production also has a contribution of 3%. Biomass burning, 14%. Rice production, 5%. So this data came from ED because they have very good studies with regards methane emission from rice paddies, and then 1.3 from farm machineries and 3% from irrigation. So this compares us with selected Asian countries. So makikita nyo yung China and Indonesia, they are heavy users of fertilizers. Sila yung highest pointer with regards emission of nitrous oxide. So ang Philippines, okay, so ito yung mga data ng Philippines. Okay, so these are the contributions from agricultural and other sources of methane emissions and nitrous oxide emissions. So what's the impact of climate change in agriculture? So farmers can lose up to more than 50,000 pesos per year due to lost productivity due to extreme weather events. And farmers are also burdened with debts as high as 40,000 pesos per hectare spent on crude oil, equipment, and supplies. So this will greatly affect the health and productivity of crops, livestock, fish, forests, and dependent rural livelihoods. So still on agriculture, so excess heat and drought in some places will cause crop losses, lower livestock and poultry production, and oversaturation of soil and physical damage. So farmers can no longer depend on rainfall for irrigation. They have to pump groundwater into the rice field. And to produce 1 kilogram of rice, we need 5,000 liters of water. So they need the diesel to operate the pumps, to pump in water, and they consume about 8 liter diesel per hour per paddy field, and they have to use that for 2 to 4 hours a day. So for agriculture, okay, so these are the impacts of climate change, loss of land through sea level rise and associated salinization. So tumataas yung salinity ng land. Okay. Alteration of crop yields due to changes in soil moisture, temperature, precipitation, cloud cover, as well as increases in carbon monoxide concentrations. reduction in soil moisture in many areas, change in soil physical properties, such as loss of soil organic matter, leaching of soil nutrients, salinization and erosion, an increase in losses due to weeds, insects, and pests, and overuse of pesticides resulting to loss of biodiversity. So on livestock, livestock is affected because of the disease. So incidence of diseases of livestock and other animals are affected by climate change because these diseases are mostly transmitted by vectors like ticks and flies. And the development stages of ticks and flies are often heavily dependent on temperature. So cattle, goat, horse, and sheep are also vulnerable to extensive range of nematode-borne infections, and most of which are their developmental stage are also influenced by climate conditions. So on food security, climate change affects not only food production, but also it affects the 4 dimensions of food security, like availability of food, access to food, stability of the supply of food, and utilization of food. So, for the food security, 70% comes from typhoons, 18% from drought, 5% from floods, 4% from volcanic eruptions, 2% from earthquakes, and then others 1%. So this is the estimated cost of natural disasters as it impacts on agriculture. How about impacts on sea coast and marine? So in a 4 degrees warmer world, coral bleaching and reef degradation and losses are very likely to accelerate in the next 10 to 20 years, which could result in the loss of fisheries as well as heavy detrimental impact on the country's tourism industry. So in terms of coastal, sea coast and marine, so the Philippines is composed of 32,400 kilometers of continuous coastline. It's an archipelago made of 7,100 islands and considered as a haven of various reef and reef-associated flora and fauna. So most people live in coastal areas and they are highly dependent on coastal fishing for living, and also seaweed farming and mangrove lumber. So the country's coral reefs provide annual economic benefits estimated to be $1.1 billion per year. So climate change on sea coast and marine impacts on ocean currents and circulation, marine biogeochemistry, mangroves, estuaries, seagrasses, beaches and shorelines, and coral reefs. So with climate change, the ocean decreases its capacity to dissolve carbon dioxide as it warms, and therefore it destroys the buffering capacity, destroys the bicarbonate formation, which is essential for reef building in tropical oceans. And also, this imbalance in carbon dioxide also produces changes in the dynamics of phytoplankton productivity, and there will be chances of toxic microorganism blooms like peptides. In terms of mangrove estuaries, so for mangrove forests, sea level rise will increase salinity, therefore will result to lesser mangrove production. There will be intensive heat in estuaries, will also disrupt the salt and water balance, and this will result to blocking of normal migration routes outside the estuary. Therefore, there will be a mixed match between the planktons and the juvenile fishes. In terms of seagrass, beaches, and shorelines, so the too much warming exposure will make the seagrasses susceptible to stress, leading to mortality, and beaches and shorelines may erode, and this will increase the incidence of storm surge, and for which coastal areas are very susceptible, especially in the eastern part of Philippines, nandun yung Tacloban and Samar, and of course result to tourism and livelihood losses. Sa coral reefs, so increased sea surface temperature brings about stress and bleaching of coral reefs. So in recent years, reefs in poor condition increased to 40% in the last 20 years. In the last years, there has also been an increase in disease incidence because of lowering of ocean pH, threatening coral reef survival around the globe. So flooding is also a problem because of climate change. So drier climate during the dry season will certainly impact on stream flow, dam operation and water allocation, domestic water supply, irrigation, hydropower generation, the depth and the charge of aquifers, water quality, watersheds, and fishery. And the recent extreme events, such as the storms Ondoy and Pepeng, have demonstrated that current water infrastructures and disaster management systems in the country cannot satisfactorily cope with the extreme climate variability. The water pumping stations throughout the Metro Manila, many of which are over 30 years old, prove useless in pumping waters onto the Manila Bay. How about health? So for health, these are the impacts of climate change. So toxic microorganisms will cause dietary constraints and even poisoning due to contaminated foods. Heat stroke has been rampant during the height of the El Nino days. Vector-borne diseases are also expected because they are expected to multiply. The environment is very optimum for their propagation. And health, shelter and security are also issues of concern, especially in areas affected by sea level rise. So the urban poor in informal settlements are the ones that are one of the most vulnerable groups to climate-related impacts, due in part to the additional pressures on urban systems created by rapidly increasing population and growth. So these are two mosquito-borne diseases, dengue and malaria, and they are directly influenced by climate change. So malaria and dengue are seasonal in nature, and there are high and low peaks in their transmission. So by 2080, so approximately 6 billion people may be at risk of contracting dengue fever as a consequence of climate change, and 2.5 billion more than if climate change were to remain unchanged. So for human health, okay, so these are the health outcomes: cardiovascular respiratory diseases, allergic rhinitis, death, injuries, infectious diseases, mental disorders, of course, other diseases like diarrhea and respiratory diseases, rodent-borne diseases, waterborne and foodborne diseases. So what is the Philippines doing? What are the mitigation programs in the Philippines? Ano yung ginagawa ng ating government? So, the Philippines is one of the countries that reacted or that addressed the problem with climate change. Because as early as 1991, by Administrative Order 2020, by Administrative Order 220, the Interagency Committee on Climate Change was established. Okay. And nauna pa tayo dun sa United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. And then we have, of course, the Kyoto Protocol, okay, where it is signed by 53 member states na we promise that we will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And then we have in 2006, so in 2004, DNR was designated as the national authority for climate change. And so on, okay? So ang pinaka-breakthrough natin is in 2009, wherein we have the law, the Climate Change Act of 2009 or the Republic Act 9729. And with this law, okay, so we have our Philippine Strategy on Climate Change Adoption. We have a National Framework Strategy on Climate Change. We have the Philippine National REG, that's reducing emissions due to forest degradation and deforestation. And then, of course, the National Climate Change Action Plan, etc. So so these are the Philippine laws which are enacted connected to climate change. So in 1990, we have the Mini Hydroelectric Power Incentives Act. Then we have the AFMA, the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act, the Philippine Clean Weather Act, Clean Air Act, Philippine Clean Water Act, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, the Biofuels Act, the Renewable Energy Bill, the Philippine Disaster Reduction and Management Act, and the Sustainable Management of Forest Act of 2011. So the Philippine Climate Change Commission is an independent and autonomous body that has the same status as a national government agency. So it is tasked to look into, formulating policies for the government, to coordinate, monitor, and evaluate programs and action plans of the government related to climate change. And the Philippine National Framework Strategy on Climate Change has two big pillars. First is adaptation pillar. So for adaptation, the long-term objective is to build the adaptive capacity of communities and increasing the resilience of natural ecosystems to climate change. And these are the key result areas. Okay? So enhanced vulnerability and adaptation assessments, integrated ecosystem-based management, water governance, climate-responsive agriculture, climate-responsive health sector, climate-proofing infrastructure, and disaster risk reduction. So ito yung adaptation pillar. For the mitigation pillar, the long-term objective is to facilitate the transition towards low greenhouse gas emissions for sustainable development. And the key areas are energy efficiency and conservation, the use of renewable energy, environmentally suitable transport, sustainable infrastructure, the national RED strategy, and waste management. So, following the adoption of the framework in April 10 and its guiding principles, we also have the National Climate Change Action Plan, which was formulated, and this outlined the country's agenda for the two pillars, the adaptation and the mitigation. So, the action plan is from 2011 to 2028. And ano ba yung mga plano under this framework? So to enhance the adaptive capacity and resilience of communities and natural ecosystems to climate change, adapt the total economic valuation of natural resources while ensuring biodiversity conservation, and recognize the competitive advantage of putting value on the direct use, indirect use, option to use, and non-use of environment and natural resources as a short to long-term sustainable development goal. And these are the priorities of the National Climate Change Action Plan, namely food security, so water sufficiency, ecological and environmental stability, human security, climate smart industries and services, sustainable energy, knowledge, and capacity development. So the goal of the NCC 80 is to build adaptive capacities of men and women in their communities, to increase the resilience of vulnerability in many sectors and natural systems to climate change, and optimize mitigation opportunities towards a responsive and rights-based sustainable development. And here are the priorities. Okay, for food security, the objective is to ensure availability of food, solid availability, stability, accessibility, and affordability of food. For water sufficiency, okay, water sector governance is required. For environmental and ecological stability, okay, so it's focused on the protection and rehabilitation of critical ecosystems and the restoration of ecological services. For human security, to reduce the risk of men and women to climate change disasters. For climate-friendly and industrial services, so the creation of green and eco jobs and sustainable consumption reduction. For sustainable energy, of course, the promotion and expansion of energy efficiency and conservation, the development of sustainable and renewable energy, and environmentally sustainable transport, climate proofing, rehabilitation of energy systems and infrastructures. So for the knowledge capacity development is very important, so we have to enhance the knowledge on the science of climate change, enhance the capacity for climate change adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction, as what we are doing now, and establish gender climate knowledge management accessible to all sectors at the national and local levels. So this is the linkage between climate change, adaptation, and this disaster risk management. So dapat talaga meron silang convergence. They are very related. That's why this seminar. So katulad sinabi ko, ako lang yung mag-set ng tone, and the meat will be the next two speakers. Okay. So we have the climate change adaptation and the disaster risk management. So the World Bank also has its own strategic framework for climate change. And this is an assistance to the Philippines in the year 2010 to 2014. So it laid the groundwork for scaling up climate change activities in the country. It contributed through both analysis and operations, including tapping into new financial mechanisms. And in fact, it has raised about 250 million, called the Clean Technology Fund. Okay, this is with a total investment program of about 2.5 billion. So, how about the private sectors? how do they share their best practice for climate change adaptation? So we have business incentives such as efficient use of energy, water, and other waste materials. Coastal incentives, we have some organizations which have worked with our LGUs to strengthen law enforcement and coastal resource management. Of course, we have tree planting, farming, and gardening, which are common measures that has contributed to the increase in the country's tree density and the enhancement of biodiversity. And the youth. Of course, some contributors have focused on environmental awareness, capacity building, and empowerment of young people. So what are the challenges in climate change adaptation, and mitigation? So ito yung mga problema, okay? So climate policy reform efforts are only partially aligned with the development plan outcomes, limiting their effectiveness. So the national, sectoral, and local development plans and policies are not fully aligned with the National Climate Change Action Plan, leading to difficulties in monitoring climate change activities and hampering coordination and convergence across sectors and levels of government. Second, the Climate Change Act requires the national government to provide technical and financial assistance to LGUs to formulate the local climate action plans, but the support remains insufficient. And then the execution and coordination of the plans are hindered because of lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities across institutions. So the broad scope of the Climate Change Commission's role and responsibilities and the lack of coordination among stakeholders have hindered the leadership and accountability in implementing the climate agenda. Fourth, the existing monitoring and evaluation systems have cumbersome reporting requirements and the lack of climate indicators which limits the usefulness. Then there is an insufficient institutional capacity, including limited access to knowledge, and the complexity of planning tools which have hindered efficient execution of the climate reforms and climate actions. The departments have an insufficient number of knowledgeable and skilled staff on climate policy, financing, and institutions. So hopefully, pag nag-graduate kayo, punta kayo sa mga department ng ating government because our departments need you. And last, LGUs are action-oriented, but the source of funding are fragmented and their available amounts are limited. Okay. So the way forward. So we look forward. There are three pillars with regards looking forward to address the climate change. So first, we have the strengthening, planning, execution, and financing framework for climate change. So strengthen the budget, okay, and align plans and strengthen implementation to achieve the goals, and rationalize and harmonize climate financing instruments. Pillar 2 is enhancing leadership and accountability through monitoring, evaluation, and review of climate change policies and activities. So we enhance the Climate Change Commission's leadership role in reviewing and communicating climate change performance, and strengthening the coordination of our Commission and oversight agencies and departments, and strengthen the monitoring and evaluation in the departments and LGUs. Of course, this is very important, building capacity and managing change. So build skills and a knowledge base on climate change and raise public awareness on climate change. So the next are just a few pictures to show global warming. So this is Super Typhoon Nenenyo, which hit Laguna. Kami yung mata. Okay, so tinumban niya yung malaking puno. Okay. So increased number of thermophilic pathogens and diseases that were once under control. So ngayon nagkalat ng avian flu, West Nile, SARS, malaria, dengue, and H1N1. So ayan, because of the climate change, naprito na yung itlog. Because of the climate change, naging backward na yung rice. And because of climate change, naging lechon na yung baboy. So, as I have said in my introduction, the reliability of the predictions on climate change is uncertain. And there are no hard facts about what will definitely be the result of increases in the concentration of greenhouse gases within the atmosphere, and no firm timescales are known. So your role as CESAM students what are the challenges of climate change that you can help address. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. Meron na pong video.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for